Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on this week's show, a look at the purge in Saudi Arabia. Just how risky is the power play for the country and the region? We're joined in the studio by Huda Abuarqoub, one of the organisers behind a historic women's march in Israel and Palestinian territories. Also coming up, in the world of fashion, rules change every day, especially in Lebanon, where bling has been traded in for the cutting edge. Now, he's just 32 years old and he's risen from near obscurity. But Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has reportedly started to reform the conservative kingdom's religious structures. He's also at the helm of an anti-corruption probe that has purged Saudi Arabian royals. Now, analysts say this is a bid for the young prince to consolidate his power. France 24's Ellen Gainsford takes a look at one of the most talked about figures in today's politics.
The wave of arrests was announced on the Al Arabian news channel, a major purge targeting ministers and princes. The orders came from this man, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Officially, the roundup is part of an anti-corruption sweep. But in reality, those arrested, including the head of the National Guard, are mostly potential rivals to the prince.
He's trying to create a power vacuum around himself, so he's the only option when the throne is free. The king may abdicate for him, but he has to be careful that the other members of the royal family don't feel marginalized and team up against him.
The ascent of Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, has been unusually rapid. Only 2 years ago, he was relatively unknown. But after his father became king in 2015, he rose to Minister of Defense, Minister of the Economy, and Vice Prime Minister. In June, he was officially announced as next in line to the throne. It's an unprecedented accumulation of power in such a short period of time.
He now controls economic policy, the military, as well as the internal security apparatus. He needed to kind of assert finally his control over one final element of the government, the National Guard. They've also embarked on a very ambitious economic reform program, and I think want to demonstrate to the international community that they're changing the way of doing business.
Mohammed bin Salman has ambitious plans for the economy. He wants to move away from oil dependence by 2030. More socially liberal than his father, he's already instigated radical reforms, allowing women to drive and enter public stadiums, and has announced he wants to rid the kingdom of Islamic extremism.
We are returning to what we were before, a country of moderate Islam that is open to all religions and to the world.
This specialist believes the kingdom is undergoing a transformation.
It's almost a kind of velvet revolution what's happening. It's a historic moment, and it's the first time that there's been so much reform in such a short period of time in Saudi Arabia.
The young reformer is hawkish in his approach to foreign policy. He's taken a tough stance against neighbouring Iran and overseen a war in Yemen. Mohammed bin Salman was also behind a diplomatic spat with Qatar, introducing an embargo on the kingdom.
We get the feeling that in order to pass these domestic measures, he's reinforcing a hard line against Tehran, using it as a way to silence his critics, who otherwise might be encouraged to protest domestically.
Whether his reforms prove successful remains to be seen. But one thing's certain, it won't be long before Mohammed bin Salman ascends to the throne.
Moving on to Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri, who has sparked a political crisis by declaring a surprise resignation. His reason was that there was a plot to kill him. All this while on a trip to Riyadh. Meanwhile, an Israeli news outlet has published a cable sent to Israeli diplomats asking them to support Saudi Arabia and Hariri against the Iran-backed Shia group Hezbollah. It's time for this week's interview on Middle East Matters. Today we're joined in the studio by Huda Abuarqoub, who's the Regional Director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. AMIP works with a network of some 110 organizations that promote grassroots peace-building initiatives in Israel and the Palestinian territories. Huda, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, always.
Now, there are so many organizations that are currently lobbying for peace in some way or other in the region. What's different about yours?
The uniqueness is that we work with real people on the ground who are struggling on a daily basis to bring people together in order to discuss the most and the hardest issues that is related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we, in our way, also trying to fill a gap that the political leadership in the Middle East has left with no vision at all. And so we are speaking to some of the hardcore issues that creates conflicts and maintains the status quo in a conflict zone.
Can you give me some examples, build a little picture for us of some of those brother-sister organizations that you work with?
So the network is 100 organizations, 100 plus organizations. 1/3 of it is co-model Israeli and Palestinian organizations. 1/3 is Palestinian only, working within the Palestinian society, and 1/3 is shared society, working with Israeli and Palestinian populations of Israel. One of these organizations that comes to my mind now is the Bereaved Family Forum. It's people who lost their loved ones to this conflict. I feel so proud every time I talk about them, because these are mothers and fathers who lost their children to this conflict, and yet had the courage to come and meet and talk about the future for Palestinians and Israelis together. I think there is no excuse for anybody else not to sit on the table and start talking about what matters to the Palestinians and Israelis in order to live in peace and a dignified life for their children.
Of course, and of course, one of the events that you're behind is that very iconic 2-week march which took place across Israel and the West Bank. Would it be accurate to say that with that march, you managed to bring the two different sides of the conflict, somehow parties, representatives from two sides together?
It's accurate, but it's not the only truth, because it seems like we are doing normalization. We're beautifying the conflict and the occupation. In this sense, with the case of Women Wage Peace, we're empowering both Palestinian and Israeli women to work within their own society. It's not about dialogue. It's about moving that dialogue to action. It's about talking the language of women who want security, not with arms and wars, security for their children. It's about women who need to feel that they belong to their society and they act as if they are belonging. It's about women who want their voices to be heard in this political dilemma. It's about women who want to speak to the people who are dismissed, marginalized among us. It's about cutting and piercing, actually, out of the bubble that is the elite talking about Israel and Palestine with no vision. These women are empowering every woman in the periphery, in the refugee camps, even in prisons, to speak up and demand an end for this conflict.
Lastly, and very briefly, Huda, you're here in Paris opening up an office. Tell us a little bit about that.
But we want to bring attention to this kind of work. We want people to know all over the world that the Middle East is not just exporting violence and blood. It's exporting a lot of hope, and it's actually thinking about ways to combat extremism all over the world through education and positive interaction.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Huda Abuarqoub of the Alliance for Middle East Peace, thank you so much for speaking to us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Over to Lebanon, where Beirut Fashion Week has just wrapped up, and our reporters met a new generation of designers that are changing the face of the industry, from bling to state-of-the-art. Some are even creating dresses for men. Here's a report from Haximels Belkin.
Lebanon has always loved its fashion. The 90s saw an explosion in Lebanese couture, with Elie Saab leading the pack. But the industry's been experiencing something of a slump in recent years. Enter the Lebanese American University and a new course aimed at training and inspiring a new generation of designers.
We need to start changing people's mentality. At the moment, I'm working on a dress for men. And as you can see, it's quite princessy. I want to show that men are free to be who they want to be.
For many, Lebanese fashion means flamboyance and bling. But students here are learning something very different: the art of cultural interrogation.
I think it's really important for young designers to explore cultural identity, heritage, political situation, gender expectations for men and women, alcohol and drug issues, mental health. We look at what it means to be an outsider.
For students born at the end of the Civil War, fashion can provide catharsis.
It's a way for us to escape reality, to remove ourselves from the real world, have a bit of fun and, yes, escape. For me, that's really what fashion's all about.
On the sidelines of Lebanese Fashion Week, the students prepare for their own fashion awards. Joya Haddad's offering aims to challenge received ideas about femininity.
The name of this collection is Blood Orchid. For me, orchids symbolize women. And the fact that it's bleeding shows the power, strength, courage, and endurance of women.
The message may be modern, but the techniques are centuries old, derived from a specifically Lebanese savoir-faire.
Look at this embroidery, for example, these pearls. We use the same techniques as big Lebanese couturiers, but whereas they use them on dresses, we use them for our ready-to-wear.
An approach that helped Haddad win the competition.
I'm completely shocked.
The jury was impressed by her audacity. Whether wider Lebanese society is ready for such a bold vision of femininity is another matter.
We finished this week's show with a first look inside an art museum in the desert. This project has been in the making for a decade. Abu Dhabi opens its Louvre Museum on Saturday with a display of 600 artworks. French President Emmanuel Macron and various heads of state will be the guests of honor at the opening. We'll leave you with some images from what's been dubbed a universal museum in the Arab world.